Welcome to our channel. Before we dive into yet another fascinating mythy, we'd like to invite you to watch, to like, and subscribe to the channel. Also activate the notification sound. Let's discuss about Adam and Eve's final days. Adam and Eve, the first humans created by God, faced profound challenges after their expulsion from the Garden of Eden. The Bible provides limited details about their lives following the birth of their third son, Seth. This narrative seeks to explore their experiences, emotions, and the legacy they left behind. After the tragic loss of Abel at the hands of Cain, Adam and Eve were blessed with another son, Seth. Eve expressed her gratitude, saying, "God has granted me another child in place of Abel." Since Cain killed him, Seth's birth marked a new beginning for the grieving parents, offering hope and continuity for humanity. According to Genesis 5-4, after Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. This suggests that Adam and Eve had a large family, contributing to the early population of the world. The apocryphal text Life of Adam and Eve provides additional insights into their lives after leaving Eden. It describes their hardships and repentance as they navigated a world vastly different from the paradise they once knew. Adam and Eve's story serves as a foundational narrative in understanding the human condition, the consequences of disobedience, and the enduring nature of faith and redemption. Adam was silent. Eve, too, had no more words. Not because they had nothing left to say, but because they had already said it all, cried every tear, felt every ache, watched paradise fade into memory, watched it all fall away. After Seth was born, the world kept moving, but the Bible fell silent. No more stories of Adam's work, no more words from Eve, no details of laughter, no mention of love, fear, or final days, just silence. And in that silence, we wonder, what became of them? What did they feel in their last days? What thoughts lived in their hearts? This story is not in the Bible, but its echoes live in everything, in the dust under your feet, in the ache behind your eyes, in the longing you feel for something lost. Let me tell you what might have been. Not myth, not fantasy, but a story written in pain and memory. In the quiet between verses, in the long breath. Before death, it began with grief, the kind that splits a soul. Abel, gone. Cain, a stranger. Seth, a hope, born from ashes. Eve held him tightly. Not with joy, but with trembling, with prayers whispered in the dark. She had buried a son, and lost another. She knew what loss was now, and Adam, he no longer stood tall, he bent with time, bent under weight, of guilt, of toil, of watching the world change, and realizing, he was the reason. He once named the animals, now he buried his children. He once walked with God, now he walked alone. Every dawn brought labor, every dusk, sorrow. They had more children. Daughters with laughter in their eyes, sons who never knew Eden, but none of them could erase the memory of the garden, of the serpent, of the fall. They didn't speak of it often, but it never left them in the wind. Eve heard it, the whisper of a garden lost. In the soil. Adam felt it, the ache of the curse. They aged slowly, but age came all the same. Adam, once strong, grew thin. Eve, once radiant, grew quiet. They did not fear death. They feared forgetting. That no one would know who they were. That the world would move on. That Eden would become a myth. So Eve taught their daughters, not just how to plant, but how to pray. Not just how to give birth. But how to love. Adam taught the boys how to break ground, but also how to build altars, how to lift their eyes to heaven. Even after being cast out, they did not stop believing. They could not. The memory of God's voice still echoed. Not in anger. But in sorrow, in mercy. In the promise. The one he gave as they left the garden. A seed would come one day. To crush the serpent. Eve held on to that. Through every pain of childbirth. Every scream, every sigh. One would come, not Cain, not Abel, not even Seth, but someone, someday, a redeemer. Her hope lived in that promise. Adam held to it too, though he never said it out loud. He believed. Even as he grew weaker, even as the earth hardened, Even as memories faded, when the sun rose slower, when birds no longer sang for them, when the names of the trees slipped from their minds, still, they waited. This was their final legacy, not just the curse, but the hope. They could not undo what was done, but they could wait. They could believe in the silence after. Seth, that's what filled the years, not more sin, but more faith, quiet, steady, like a river. Under Stoneadam's hands were calloused, not from building temples, not from writing scrolls, but from survival, from digging, from bending to the earth that no longer obeyed him. Each day began the same. He'd wake before the light, breathe in the dust, feel his bones, protest and begin again. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. He remembered the garden, but now he only saw thorns. Eve was slower now. The years wore on her gently. Then suddenly, her hair once shone like the morning. Now it was silver. Soft, tied in quiet braids by granddaughters. They adored her, but they did not know who she truly was. Not really. They saw a woman who smiled too rarely, who stared too long at the trees, who sometimes wept without reason, but they did not. No. Why? Eve remembered the feel of God's breath, the weight of his words, the sound of her own name on his lips. She had once been whole. Now, even joy felt fractured. Because it was always touched by loss. She watched her children, saw in them the echo of Eden, and the echo of Cain. Love, mixed with fear. Hope, with pain. She had seen what anger could do, what envy could become. So she taught them softly, not with power, but with presence. She taught her daughters to sing when the sun rose. She taught her sons to bury their rage, not under silence, but under truth. Adam saw his sons grow strong. He saw them fight, saw them cry. He watched them try to worship, try to speak to the God he once walked with, and he wept, because he knew how close he had been, and how far they were. He didn't speak of Eden often, but when he did, silence fell. He would close his eyes, and describe the light. Not just the light you see, but the light you feel, the kind that touches the soul, that changes you. He told them about the river, the one that split into four, how it glittered like glass. He told them about the tree, not the one they ate from, the other one. The one that gave life. The one they never reached. They listened. Some with wonder, some with doubt, some turned away, but others leaned in. They wanted to know, they wanted to understand the pain they were born into. The ache they carried without knowing why. Adam told them the truth. All of it. He didn't hide, didn't blame. He spoke of the serpent, but not with fear. With sorrow he spoke of the choice, the one moment that changed everything, and the voice of God. After, not angry, but heartbroken, like a father watching his child walk away. He told them how the ground cried out, how the leaves no longer shimmered, how their bodies felt different, heavy, heavy, tired, ashamed. He told them of the garments God made, how even in wrath there was mercy, even in exile there was love. Eve would nod quietly. She remembered it all too well. They lived for centuries, but not in luxury, not in peace. Each year added another layer of grief, but also another layer of wisdom. They saw storms, floods, fires. They saw joy, marriages, songs, children. Born with strong lungs and wild eyes, it was all mixed. Darkness and light, sorrow and singing, but always memory. Eden, the fall, the promise, the silence after Seth, wasn't emptiness, it was sacred space. Where faith grew in the soil of regret, they knew death would come. They had never seen it, but they felt it, in their bones, in their breath. It followed them. Not with malice, but with finality. They didn't run, they prepared. Eve would watch the stars, whisper names no one else knew. Adam would sit alone at twilight, and sometimes he would speak not to the wind, not to himself, but to the one he once knew, the one who made him. They waited for the end, not with dread, but with patience, with hope, because they remembered the promise. One would come, a seed, born of a woman, who would crush the serpent, undo the curse, bring them back, not to Eden, but to something even greater. They didn't live to see it, but they died believing it. That was their final legacy. Not the garden, not the fall, but the faith that never died. The days grew shorter, the light softer, not gone, just thinner, like breath on glass. Adam began to speak less. His words became fewer, but heavier, each one like a stone placed gently on sacred ground. Eve stayed by his side, she always had, even when they left Eden, even when they buried Abel, even when Cain vanished into the wildlands, she never left now. They sat side by side, no throne, no altar, just stone and soil. Their throne was the earth. Their altar was memory. They didn't need crowds, didn't need a book, because they were the beginning of every STR, every life, every generation, every mistake, and every miracle that started with them. Sometimes their children would gather, not always. Some had grown distant, lost in cities, lost in self, but a few stayed near. Faithful ones, sons who watched Adam till the land, even when he could barely lift a tool. Daughters who brought Eve water, braided her hair with flowers, listened when she whispered dreams. They didn't speak of Eden every day, but it lived in every gesture, every shadow, every shy. And when their great-grandchildren asked, "Did you really walk with God?" they would smile, not proudly, not sadly, just softly. "Yes," Eve would say. "Yes," Adam would echo. And what did he sound like? The children's eyes would widen, hungry, hunging. They didn't want fairy tales, they wanted him. Adam would close his eyes and speak, like thunder wrapped in comfort, like water over stone, like everything you've ever needed but didn't know how to ask. He would weep, not from pain, from memory, from the ache of absence. That's what death is. After all, not just an ending, but a return, a closing of the circle, dust to dust, breath back to breath. They didn't fear it, they welcomed it, because they had seen enough, they had carried enough, not just the curse, but the grace that followed. That's what people forget. It wasn't all punishment, it wasn't all pain. There was mercy too. Every sunrise after Eden was mercy. Every child born was mercy. Every heartbeat, every leaf dot, every whispered prayer. Mercy wrapped in exile, love wrapped in consequence. That's the mystery. That's what Adam and Eve came to understand. They hadn't just fallen. They had been held. Even in their failure, God did not abandon them. He taught them how to live outside the garden, inside the pain. He clothed them, spoke to them, watched over them. Even when they wept, even when they doubted, he was still there, not in fire, not in a voice, but in the rhythm of breath. The breaking of bread, the labor of love. That's what they taught their children, not to fear God, but to long for him, not to hide, but to return, again and again, even if they never made it back to where Denthi could move toward him. With every offering, every act of kindness, every tear shed in truth, they would move a little closer. That was enough. By the end Adam could barely walk. His steps were slow, but his eyes were clear. He looked up often, past the trees, past the clouds. Searching, listening. Eve stayed beside him, sang softly when he couldn't sleep. Held his hand when he forgot names, whispered the stories they lived through so he wouldn't forget. And when the time came when Adam took his last breath, it was not with fear. It was with peace, because he knew death was not the end, it was the beginning. Again, Eve wept, not just because he was gone, but because she remembered the first moment she saw him, how the breath had just entered his lungs, how his eyes had opened, and she knew she was not alone now. She was again, but only for a moment. She did not live long after. She didn't need to. She had done what she came to do. She had lived, fallen, grieved, loved, taught, hoped, Enosh rested. The silence returned. Not empty, not cold, sacred, heavy, a silence that holds everything, all the beginnings, all the endings, all the prayers, all the promises. They were buried near the same tree. Not a tree from Eden, but one that reminded them, its roots deep, its branches stretched toward heaven just like them. Adam was laid down first, Eve beside him. No temple, no priest, just earth, and weeping, and wind. The ground that once cursed Adam, now received him, not in wrath, but in rest. Their children stood still. Even the loudest were quiet. Even the distant ones returned, because something sacred had ended, or, perhaps begun. They whispered stories to the next generation, not just of the fall, but of faith. Not just of sin, but of mercy. The world moved forward, new cities rose, languages spread, nations formed, but always story remained. Of a man formed from dust, of a woman born of bone, of a garden, of a choice, of a voice calling in the cool of day. They remembered, not perfectly, not clearly, but deeply, in every culture, every tribe, every corner of the earth. The memory stirred, of a paradise lost, of a curse carried, of a promise whispered. That's why it haunts us still. Because we are not far from Adam, we are not far from Eve. Their breath is in our lungs. Their ache is in our bones. We inherited more than sin. We inherited their story, their questions, their longing. We inherited the wait for redemption, for return. And deep down, even feel it. The homesickness for a place we've never seen, the ache for a garden we never walked in, the grief of a fall we didn't commit, but the hope of a promise. We still believe, because if the curse is Relthan, so is the Redeemer. If death came through one man, then life will come through another. Adam and Eve did not see, but they heard the whisper, they felt the pull. They saw it in the stars, in the soil, in their sons and daughters. One would come not to bring them back to Eden, but to bring Eden to us. That's what the silence after Seth is about. It's not a gap, it's a waiting room, a sacred pause, before the long journey begins, through Noah, through Abraham, through Moses, through kings, through prophets, to a stable, to a cross. To a garden again. But this time empty, because he rose, because death had met its end, because the curse was undone. But that's a later chapter. For Noah, sit in the silence. We feel what they felt. We carry what they carried, and we remember. They were not legends, not symbols, not myths. Not myths. They were real. They bled, they broke, they lost, just like us, and they waited, just like us, and they believed, just like we must. Their silence is not absence, it is invitation to look deeper, to listen closely, to ask the questions they once asked. Can we return? Will he come? Are we still loved? Yes. Yes.